Howdy, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Pro Podcast. Today, I'm bringing you, I was going to say the man, the myth, the legend, but that doesn't work, does it? The woman, the myth, the legend. That is Ellie McKay. Now, if you haven't seen Ellie out on social media, then you aren't on social media enough, because to be honest, no matter what time of day you log on, she's there somewhere. And she has two absolutely awesome podcasts, which I have been fortunate enough to be a guest on. She has gone from, well, pretty much starting from nowhere to absolutely dominating the property space, the business space, with multiple different successful companies building multi-million pound property portfolios. And I know that today we're going to talk about mindset, business, marketing, social media, maybe even a little bit of the 2-year pandemic that we stepped into for a little bit of a period of time. But without further ado, Ellie, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, what a lovely introduction, Gary. Well, like, if this podcast doesn't take off, people have said this to me before, and I'm going to say it to you. Can you just walk about and introduce me wherever I go? Because you make me sound good.
I know you feel like you have to go into a presenter voice when you start, don't you?
It's really weird that you should say that. This is so true. All of my podcasts pretty much start off with me sounding really professional in this phone voice, and by the end of them, I'm usually like, "Oh no, fucking this, fucking that," and really unprofessional. Let's get the swearing out of the way, and then hopefully we can just raise the tone of the interview going forward.
Exactly. And for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube and are listening to the podcast, just to give you context, there will be some F-bombs, because right behind Ellie's head right now is fuck average, be legendary. And where did that come around, Ellie?
Just my mantra, really. You know, mediocrity is not for me. It was probably for the first 36 years of my life, and it certainly isn't how I live my life moving forward. So it's just a great reminder.
Yeah, it's so good to have the little anchors that you can rely back on, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Mm.
So give us for the people who don't know you and are literally living under a rock, not on social media channels, absolutely anywhere, give us a little bit of a whistle-stop tour from, you know, as far back as you want to go that you feel is potentially relevant, and sort of bring us a little bit up to date in the journey of Ellie. And I'll pick out some bits that we can dive into to help the listeners.
Yeah, okay. Brief overview. You never know how far back to get this. So there was my first memory about age 5. No, on a serious note, I left school pretty average at school. I was quite intelligent, but I wouldn't say I was very well suited to the current education system, which seems to be a bit of a recurring theme with my own podcast guests as well. I've no diagnosis. I very much suspect I've got ADHD. I've got a history of bipolar in my family. So my childhood, my adolescence, and the majority of my life's just been a hell of a roller coaster. So from leaving school, you will know by the end of this, if the listeners aren't familiar with me, they will know by the end of this episode how much I love to talk. So basically I went to college to go and do my HND in journalism, and realized it was far too much hard work. I wasn't going to, I had images of being a war correspondent, and when that didn't happen within like 4 to 6 weeks, I quickly became quite disillusioned. And I was working at the time in Burger King part-time on £3.60 an hour. And a friend of mine came in for a burger, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" Because we were the next town along. And she told me that she was working doing double glazing. She was doing cold calling on £4 an hour. And I was scratching my head. I was like, "You're literally getting paid more than me, and your job is to talk. This is like my dream vocation." So I pretty much put my notice in and went to go and work at this call center. I say call center, there was no computers or anything like that back then. You were literally just dialing off a book. And then one day, the regional manager came in and pulled me out of the office, made me sit in the manager's office. I'm thinking, shit. And everybody else was probably another 30 people in the room, plus the manager and the assistant manager. And long story short, he basically came back into the office, having addressed the rest of the room. And he'd sacked every single person, including the management team, and then just came back in, no explanation to me, just says, "Right, you can go back in and finish your shift." So there I was by myself, picking up the phone and dialing. And very quickly, like literally within 6 months, I got promoted to assistant manager. And when I was the assistant manager, unfortunately, the manager's son became quite poorly, and he was off for an extended period of time. So literally from getting the assistant manager's position, within a week, I was acting manager. And during that period, we literally smashed all the records. And when the manager came back, they demoted him and made him my assistant. So from a very young age, I was kind of making quite crazy money. The basic wasn't particularly high, but at 17, 18, I was probably clearing the equivalent of 100 grand a year. It was absolutely crazy money. But what I didn't have at the time, Gary, was the mindset to be able to handle that, or the knowledge on, anything to do with long-term generational wealth. I mean, it came in one hand and it went out the other. Anyway, I ended up moving to Doncaster, age 19. I got offered I actually quit my job because my manager was a bit of a knob. And my divisional manager says, look, if you come to Doncaster, we're looking for an area manager. If you can recruit a new manager for the Doncaster telesales team, we'll give you the Yorkshire region. And I literally made the decision there and then, accepted the job offer on the phone. And within 10 days, I was living in Doncaster. That was 20 years ago now. And I kind of never looked back. I met my husband and things. And what I will say, and there's a big part of the sort of my story that's less relevant, but a few things happened at that time. My sister was seriously unwell. I mentioned there's a history of bipolar in my family. My sister was sectioned and my family needed a lot of support at the time. And I really needed a 9 to 5. And as much as I was on the big money when I worked in telesales, firstly, we'd been two-paid to another company and I was getting half of what I'd previously earned. But it was very much a 14-hour-a-day job, 6 days a week, available on Sundays, working one Sunday a month. I wasn't really able to get back and have that work-life balance that we all sort of strive to have. Does that exist? That's probably a good talking point. But I basically quit my job and ended up going into a 16 grand a year job in recruitment and kind of worked my way back up over the years. And I was very much in victim mentality for a long time. I was quite depressed. But I always had a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit still deep inside me. And my husband and I, in our early 20s, we decided, this is so true. This is true. People think this is bullshit, but I wish it was bullshit. I wish it was bullshit. We sat on a beanbag. I remember it, our first house. We sat in a beanbag together and we Googled get rich quick. We're like, how are we going to become the quickest way to become a millionaire? And at the time, it was a toss-up between stocks and shares and property. And we went for property. We got involved in a development. We were well over our head. We did no due diligence. We had no clue what we were doing. We were told that we could buy this property, that we'd be able to, when it was developed, we were buying it like so significantly below market value that we would just we'd make 100 grand on the flip. Like you couldn't possibly go wrong. So we were getting bank loans and all sorts of stuff that you weren't meant to do in order to be able to meet these contractual obligations and things. And it was a complete disaster. The development got flooded. It was about 6 years later than anticipated. By the time it was finished, it was in the middle of a global recession. A property that was due to be worth 125 grand was worth 60 grand. And yeah, it was a nightmare. I pretty much had a mental breakdown, like a genuine mental breakdown. I was under so much stress. I was working in the prisons at the time, at the prison service. I was getting bullied at work. Everything kind of came to a massive crescendo. And I became very, very risk averse after that. And it wasn't really until years later that I got reintroduced to this crazy world of property that I really started to switch my mindset. And to try and conclude a very long-winded story there, I've realised I've been banging on. But yeah, a few sort of, we had a few light bulb moments. 2016, our electrical business, my husband went on to build a really successful business. 2016, we got screwed over. We nearly lost everything, on the brink of bankruptcy and Q mental breakdown number 2. But at that point, our definition of success really changed. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Gary, but when you're in a situation where you're literally fighting to keep the roof above your head, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. You're waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks and things like that. But it was a defining moment for us because we thought we've got two choices here. My husband's an electrician by trade. He could have either went back to going on the tools, earning 50, 60 grand a year, which for the north of England's not too shabby a salary, or we were going to become really fucking successful and not allow all that hardship, all that pain, all that, losing tens of thousands of pounds be in vain. And that was a bit of a turning point for us. And 2018, there I was, postnatal depression, no clue what I wanted to do with my life, got made redundant from a job on when I was in the prison service whilst I was on maternity leave. Ended up claiming job seekers allowance, walking into the job centre with my double pram. And Mark was watching something in our kitchen. He was using Apple TV and he was watching like a live webinar, and it was a property webinar, but it was actually on mindset. And there was something that was said there which just reawoke a bit of a fire in me. And it said, if something is humanly possible, then it's within your reach. And my husband was booked to go on to do some property training. And that was a moment I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go on this training with you. I had no self-confidence. I was literally having panic attacks on an almost daily basis, struggling to leave the house a lot of the days. But we did this property training. It changed the trajectory of our life. And we went from being on job seekers allowance, using the last of my redundancy money to pay for the education, to doing 25 property deals in our first year.
25 in a year, people. That is absolutely insane. And what a transformational journey that has been. I can't believe I don't know where to start. Well, I do know where to start. I've taken a few little notes, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, to listen to that and hear that entire journey, Ellie, what I didn't even realize from our own podcast, obviously, or when we did your one on a mission, it's only been, at the time of recording this, 4 years since, you kind of restarted and rebirthed. That's massive. Where are you at now? Just to give people context, is it's, you often hear these stories that, the overnight success, you see the memes of the iceberg, and obviously all of it's under the water, realistically, the hard work that you've been through. And from the sounds of it, you've been with your husband for most of your life and you've been through an entire journey from childhood. And in the last 4 years, where are you now, to give people some inspiration and we'll go back to some of the stuff that I've picked out on.
It's funny because even though I have given you probably the most long-winded first answer to a question you've probably ever had in any of your podcast, that was such a short version. And it's really interesting you talk about the overnight success, because there's so many ventures that we've tried and failed along the way. Boiler companies. When I think back, there's just so many things that we've lost thousands of pounds experimenting with. And can I just say as well, from, it all sounds amazing, 25 properties in your first year, the amount of mistakes that we made, the amount of money we lost with trusting the wrong people and things like that, it was far from a straight line. It's not like we just got this all sussed out 4 years ago.
But on that though, the mistakes are where you've had the success, right? Because I know you, and you're gonna, it's fail forward, isn't it?
Yeah, I just did a post on this morning. Feel forward.
And I haven't actually seen it, so I'm not going to lie. It'll come up on my feed at some point today. But yeah, it is. I know your mindset and your mentality. And I think the thing that and I don't know if you realize this in your own, but this is my perception, and tell me if I'm wrong. But, 2016, you realized was a pivotal year for me. 2015, totally relate to that. I built a business that I hated. I was spending 20 grand a month on low quality leads. I was waking up anxious. I was back to work 3 days after my first daughter was born. It was like the worst year of my life in many respects from that point of view. So I really resonate with that, that little glimmer of hope in the webinar that you kind of watched, and, getting to that point of actually realizing you seeing this opportunity and still having the opportunity in front of you. And just, I love that saying of, if something's humanly possible, then it's within your reach. Being able to just take that opportunity and realize that you're the only one who can create your own success is what's going to make it happen, right?
Yeah, and it takes time to realize that. And people find that a controversial thing to say, but they're not typically people that are more successful than me, because everyone who is further down the path that I want to travel, they take full ownership for where they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And just to give you a little bit of a context before I tell you about where we're at today, 2016, when we did have that light bulb moment and we redefined what our definition of success was, because we didn't just want to be successful, we wanted to be really fucking successful. We really wanted to turn that pain into power. But it wasn't like some Hollywood movie where the path just lights up and it was like eureka. No, it wasn't like that at all. From making that decision, so my daughter, Isabella, our second child, she was born in the midst of all of this, and that was my first experience with postnatal depression. And I say my first experience because we were there. We had our two beautiful girls. We'd only ever intended on having two children. We were dealing with a lot of stuff financially. We were in a very bad place mentally. My husband was. I always overshare. I like to overshare. So apologies right now. Husband booked in for the snip. He's booked in for his consultation on the Monday. I've got a 3-month-old baby in my arm, bearing in mind, fighting for our business, fighting for our home, postnatal depression. The Friday before the consultation, I find out I'm pregnant with our third and definitely final child. My beautiful little boy, just about to turn 5, Sammy. I'm a great believer that these things don't happen by chance, and he's definitely the best thing that's ever happened to us. But in that moment, it was far from an ideal scenario, and so many things continued to happen. My gran got a terminal diagnosis. My sister got sectioned again. We lost my father-in-law very suddenly to cancer, literally from getting his diagnosis to dying. You're talking a couple of short months, and the shit just kept on coming. It was like I talk a lot about the law of attraction, and the importance of getting momentum, and we certainly had momentum. It just wasn't going in the right direction. And when I look back on it now, it almost feels like I've got a disconnect from that story, because it genuinely feels like a past life. But
part of your life.
yeah, and I think this is why I do talk about mindset so much, because we continue to put one foot in front of the other. For myself, not in the business world, my husband was trying to rebuild the electrical business, but I was on maternity leave, and then of course, because I got pregnant again, I was on maternity leave again. And then I got made redundant. And then when that came to an end, I had a very brief period on job seekers allowance. So again, it wasn't an overnight process. Yes, the mindset is important, but it's the law of attraction meets the law of action. You've got to you've really got to turn up and get out of bed on those days where, and I say get out of bed because I was I was very depressed. A successful day for me at that point was getting out of bed and looking after my children. It wasn't buying a property or building an empire or anything like that. And if you fast forward to answer your question to where we are today, yeah, we can say we've got a multi-million-pound portfolio. We are looking to sell that, so hopefully I'll not be able to say that for much longer. We're in the process of buying a hotel, a beautiful big coach house that's currently being used as a hotel that we're converting into 8 houses. We're doing our first land and new build development site, our first solo venture, 8 luxury properties there. We're getting involved in 5-star luxury holiday homes. We're no longer doing the buy-to-lets and the buy-to-flips and the HMOs and the conversions that have got us to this point. And it's all go. We're now investing in different businesses. We've had a lot of learnings, let's just say, over the last 4 years. Like during COVID, you said we might touch on COVID, and keeping this business related, like our electrical business. This is so important for the listeners to have multiple streams of income, because had we just been dependent on that electrical business, we'd have been fucked. Like all our contracts were with sheltered houses and care homes, and the support we got from the government didn't scratch the surface in terms of what our outgoings were. We had quite a lot of staff on the books and things, and through adversity comes opportunity. So we ended up creating our fire protection business off the back of that, which turned over like 800 grand in its first year, highly profitable. Did we see a penny of that, Gary? No. Did we fuck? That went to the electrical business. So it was that classic robbing Peter to pay Paul. But entrepreneurs need to solve problems, and we need to pivot and things like that. And whilst other people, there was a lot of trepidation in the marketplace during COVID, we were on the offensive. We had a lot less competition. We were able to go out there and buy aggressively and secure deals and really get ahead. And actually, we moved forward. I would say that, within the space of 18 months, we probably fast forwarded where we would have been had COVID not happened for 5 years within our property business. But then there was many lessons and mistakes learned in other areas of our business as well. Yeah, we've got our fingers in a lot of pies. We're actually moving over to Dubai. We're setting up businesses in Dubai. We're about to get involved in developments over there as well. And we're actually going to be relocating. This isn't exclusive. I've not told anyone this yet. We're relocating the whole family to Dubai January 2023.
Are you? That's a big shift. Very
Yeah.
nice. Very nice. Yeah, what a transformational journey, particularly over the last 4 years. And I think you downplay the mindset part of it, I think, because much like you, we had a company here in Essex called Zenith Windows. And I started
That's
out.
what I work for.
Yeah, there you go. So in Essex, I was Zenith Windows. So you say, I go back to kind of, where does the resilience, where does the initial, and you might not notice it, you know it, you might, well, looking back now, I realize it. When you phone 100 people and you have to get 99 no's,
Yeah.
you have to start finding the yeses. And that's all. That was almost my first sort of hack into mindset, I think. And I reckon that was probably where your resilience kind of started. And, you know, that's probably where you then made the transition. And obviously you've had knock after knock after knock after knock in so many different ways from a mental standpoint, as well as the foundation in your family, obviously going back to the bipolar element that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But do you think that was your first kind of experience of building resilience and building that can-do attitude, that I don't give a fuck that somebody said no to me, because I'm just going to pick up the phone and go again? Because it, like you said, action is what gets results.
Yeah, I can't believe you used to work for Zenith Windows. You know, it's really interesting. Some countries, they still have the mandatory service to the army and things like that. I think everyone should have to do cold calling. It's such a character building life skill. And I don't think I quite appreciated how much I was learning at the time. It was a bit like the Wolf of Wall Street. Like, I literally remember I used to stand on my desk. I was like, it's interesting because it's everything comes down to belief and a mindset. And as someone who used to train people in sales, I could listen to somebody and they could be pitch perfect. They could stick to their script, although they had autonomy to play about with it, and all the best salespeople, and inject their own personality into it. They could be handling the objections perfectly, to the point where there'd be nothing that I could correct them on, yet they wouldn't be converting the sales. And the only thing that differentiated the successful people from the not successful people was the ones who believed at the start of their shift unequivocally that they were going to perform, they were going to get the sales. Failure was not an option. And I was quite into Tony Robbins and stuff like that long before personal development was a thing. I mean, I'm talking over 20 years ago now, and I remember reading Paul McKenna, How to Change Your Life in 7 Days. And it actually got me to stop smoking I stopped smoking when I was like 20 something. Yeah, something like that. I'd smoked from like 14 to 20. And I remember reading these books, and back then, even my family are like, what a load of crap. If you're going to stop smoking, you don't need a book to do it. That's all like woo-woo, wishy-washy American nonsense. And I must admit, I think over the years, I did become jaded and turn my back on the personal development world. I just thought it was a load of happy, clappy bullshit. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, it doesn't tend to be successful. And when I say successful, by the way, I'm not just talking about money in the bank. I'm talking about happiness. It's not happy people, generally successful people, that have that negativity towards self-development, in my experience. And I don't think it's any coincidence the times in my life when I've been happiest have been the times when I've been focusing on like the reasons to succeed instead of the reasons to fail. And you definitely need to build up that resilience, because life is going to send you knocks, and you can't just be positive and happy when you've got all your ducks in a row, because that's not going to happen. There's going to get grenades chucked at you constantly. And I think it's situations only have the meaning that we choose to attach to them. But that was a baptism of fire at Zenith Windows. It was a great experience. It was absolutely amazing. And the mindset, I'll attribute the mindset towards the success. But I'll tell you, I don't know to say this or not. There was something else as well that definitely played a part. So I used to.
I'm so wondering where you're going with this.
Yeah, I know, and I'm already regretting starting this story, but yeah,
You got to finish now.
So it was in Leith, right? Leith in Edinburgh, which is actually quite a nice area now, but it's got its dodgy parts. I used to get the bus and then a train, and then I used to have to walk down bottom of Leith Walk, and there was just this call centre. It was nothing fancy. It's a telesales room, not a call centre. Maximum maybe 20 people in the room at the same time. And there was one of these like pound shops, but they weren't called pound shops back then. It was just like a bargain sort of crappy shop where you get all cheap bits of, everything basically. And I was in the shop one day and they did these drinks called Battery, and they had a plus sign on them. And I got a pack of 6 for 20p or something ridiculous. And I went back and I had one and I felt amazing. And I gave one to the person next to me. And everyone's like, oh my God, these drinks are bloody great. And I mentioned earlier about standing on the desks. And I'm going, and another thing. Like the other thing, I was so passionate about these windows, genuinely passionate about windows, which is really sad. And another thing, we've got these neoprene seals. Oh my God, this is what they use up in space. It's just amazing. And there's like some 9-year-old women going, sorry, love, can you say that again? Anyway, I was just in my own little world, loving life. And then one day I went to go and get some more of these Battery, and the guy's taking them all off the shelf. I was like, what are you doing? He said, oh, he's like, don't tell anyone, but like these have just been pulled off the market. It turns out they're laced with amphetamine. They're like they're illegal. And I was like, what are you doing with them all? He was like, oh, I'm chucking them. I was like, I'll have them.
Yeah,
taking them back, taking the last few crates back to the call center. So yeah, that was it.
Amazing.
It was interesting times.
Mindset
and amphetamine are the keys to success.
And we're just going to caveat it here. We do not condone drugs or any form of amphetamine, but it can have an advantage on your sales ability. But I think what you said there, and I really want to double down on this for the listeners, because, I've got a lot of advisors who listen to this, and that was the big thing. You mentioned it there, belief, particularly in sales. I used to, from doing Zenith Windows, I used to phone 100 bits of mortgage data to get one sale. I used to go and do an evening appointment and then knock the next 10 doors because I knew that 9 of them would give me a no. And if I needed to, if I got 1 in 5, then happy days. I knew that if I knocked 15, I'd end up with 2 appointments, So it was like that whole resilience. But I used to sit in my car before I went to those face-to-face meetings or going and knocking on the doors. And a bit like you said, you've got to control your energy. You've got to control your state. So from a personal perspective, it was like the routines that I had when I was a kid, going out onto the football pitch and, putting certain boots on, lacing it up before the other one, and all these little things that get you into a mental state and get you into the point of, I'm phoning this person because I believe in my product and I'm going to sell to this person on the other end, not because I'm a dodgy salesperson, but because I believe in what I'm selling in and I know that they need it. I've just got to now make them want it. Is the game changer, not only to your conversions, but also your bank balance, also the lifestyle that you want to live. If you go into something half-hearted, then you're going to be only getting 50% of the outcome and the results that you realistically want. And I think that is such a powerful message that I definitely, listening to that, it almost took me back to that boiler room, standing in there, everybody standing up, corded phones where you sort of turn around and then you strangle yourself. It's like, it was carnage, but resilience, sales, and ability to obviously convert and just keep moving forward from the nose is definitely a game changer. So get yourself in the right mental state before you go into a sales environment or even just a conversation.
Or even just to start your day though, Gary, because
yes,
I think it's worth saying, look at all the top athletes. It's not just sports coaches that they've got. They all have mindset coaches, and how you do anything is how you do everything. But one of my favorite quotes, and it's been my favorite quote from literally age 16 or whenever I first started in sales, was Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. The power is always in the simplicity with these things. It's not just knowing that we're capable of more. It's not just saying it. It's a lot of people do, they talk about gratitude, they talk about affirmations, they talk about a lot of these tools that a lot of us use, but there's a difference between knowing them and using them, and really believing in them, and really believing in yourself. And if there's something about you that's you want to improve, yeah, you can't just sit there and meditate and manifest that change, but you do need to believe that you're capable of making that change. You need to identify what steps you need to take in order to overcome whatever challenge or obstacle, or develop a skill that you might require in order to get on. So yes, you do need to take the tangible action, but you truly do need to have that belief. And also, when you're visualizing things, because I think visualizing is really important,
Yep.
visualize it with passion and conviction. Imagine yourself in that scenario, but imagine how it feels to be in that scenario. Imagine how it's going to feel when you get paid that commission at the end of the month for getting that sale. Or imagine how it's going to feel to help somebody out of a situation by selling them your product or service that you believe about. Obviously you've got to be legal, moral, ethical in your approach, and I'm presuming your listeners, like my listeners, are all operating ethically. But if you believe that what you're doing is truly helping people, then it's a disservice by not putting yourself out there with conviction.
Totally with you. Totally with you. And I think you and I can both, I started my personal development in 2016, and the saying from NLP that I always harp on about is there is no failure, there's only feedback. The thought that we could probably sit here all day and talk about law of attraction, most definitely, visualization, morning routines. I'm a huge fan of the nighttime routine more than anything else as well. Mindfulness, breathing, taking time just to actually sit and let your brain sit for 10 minutes or 12 minutes and just be with your thoughts. Slowing down and giving yourself these opportunities is an absolute game changer without a shadow of a doubt. But I'd like to switch gears slightly, and it will continue on in the mindset side of things, no doubt. But I know we get lots of ladies who listen to this, and I work with lots of female mortgage advisors and business owners, who are trying to juggle life, business, 3 kids. You've mentioned postnatal depression. And I think this is a real key message as well for all the lads and husbands and fathers listening, because I'm hugely fortunate. My wife never went through any of the postnatal depression or anything else at all. But I've got friends who have done, and I know it was a real struggle. But I think I'd like to hear, for the benefit of our listeners as well, in terms of how you managed to, what was that postnatal depression like? How did you manage to keep the business going? How did you manage to support Mark? And just what that kind of process was like, as well as continuing on. You obviously had it twice, you mentioned. So take us on a little bit of an inspiring journey for the listeners on that front.
Yeah, I mean, so I say postnatal depression, but depression's depression, and I was no stranger to depression. I had been on all sorts of heavy duty medication, like an insane amount of medication, since 2010. So obviously this was managed and what have you during my pregnancies. My eldest was born in 2012, and there was no postnatal depression or what have you. My normal depression, or whatever, if you like, was kind of being managed. But I suppose it's difficult to pigeonhole the kind of depression, if that even makes sense, in 2016, because I mentioned to you we were going through so much shit. So this was before I was actively involved in the business. I did hit rock bottom. I had a lot of physical complications as well throughout my pregnancy. I spent a lot of the pregnancy in bed, or going to hospital appointments, being admitted to hospital. So I'd actually been off work pretty much the entire pregnancy, which meant by the time I went into the property world in 2018, I mean, I'd been signed off since October 2015. That was a hell of a gap for being out of work, as somebody who'd always been in some form of education or employment from leaving school. And yes, that was because I was poorly, and that was then because I was on maternity leave. But a lot of the women in particular will resonate. Their mums, you do feel like your brain's going to mush a little bit. You're doing all these singing plays, and you just a lot of baby talk, and you're not getting necessarily much stimulation. And arguably that's not the case for everyone, but this was before I was of the mindset to listen to podcasts and audiobooks and things like that. I might pick up the odd fiction book, but at that point in my life, I was your classic person who lived for the weekend. This is, whilst I was working, I was binging on Real Housewives of Cheshire and other sort of reality like TV shit. And I'm not judging anyone who watches that, because I'm just going to put this out there. I fucking love Ireland. Anyone who doesn't love Ireland can get off my feet, because we all have our
watching it, and I secretly sit there. I'm like, oh, go on then.
It's body goals. We're talking about visualization. I'm like, I want to look like that. But like genuinely, I wasn't putting something that I talk about a lot. Be mindful of not just what you eat physically. I mean, I'm no nutrition expert, but more in terms of the mindset that if we are just listening to the news or negativity constantly, that does have an impact on our mental health. And at that time, I used to watch the news constantly. And pre-pandemic, I mean, bad news sells. So you're never going to feel more cheerful after watching a stint of BBC News. But it was difficult. So 2017, when I had Sammy, and then again, I was struggling. He didn't sleep at all. He didn't sleep. My girls had been brilliant, but he cried day and night, literally from waking up in the morning right through. And I remember getting to the point where I actually got the not the midwife, but whoever your family worker that stays with you for your first 12 months or what have you, and just said, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I literally don't know if I can do this. It was just relentless. And yeah, it was from a confidence point of view. I don't know if I'd have ever walked through. It sounds like such a simple thing, and I talk about this stuff openly because I think it's important to show people that you can transition, but it's difficult to try and put myself back there in terms of it's so far removed from where I am now. Like, to genuinely not have the confidence to leave your own house. It's it's hard for me to even resonate with that, as daft as that sounds. And when I did that property training in 2018, Sam was only, how old was he? Like 5 months old or something like that at the time when we first got involved with the property business. I think he was a bit older than that by the time we did the training. But he wasn't even a year old. And people thought I was mental. They're like, there'll be plenty of time for all of that when your kids are older. Your kids should be the priority. There was a lot of shaming, a lot of guilt involved. We had to go away to do these 5 days of training. Nobody would have all 3 children. So from a practical, logistical point of view, there was so many moving parts just to get there behind the scenes that people without children won't necessarily appreciate. So by the time we walked in those doors, I mean, I was already like a burst ball because we had childcare fall through 48 hours before. I'd been literally in the fetal position, crying, saying, what is the point? What is the fucking point? Every time I pick myself back up, I get kicked back down again. And I nearly didn't go, Gary.
So what was driving you at that point in time then? What was, you've got a 5-month-old, you've nearly lost your childcare, you're in your fetal position. What was driving you to go to that property training?
My book's going to be called Inner Grit when it comes out, because I don't know how you quantify this. I don't know what quantified. I certainly didn't feel strong at the time. I mean, I was a mess. I was a complete mess. But there was something in me, even in my darkest days. And when I say my darkest days, I've been, would you say suicidal? I've had suicidal thoughts for sure. I have felt that it would be a lot easier to be dead. And people who have never been in that space can say, well, how can you even consider that when you've got children? But what a lot of people don't appreciate, unless they've been in that dark hole, is when you feel like that, you feel so worthless. You genuinely believe that your family and your children and the people in your life will be better off without you. You feel that you're doing them, and that you know that they're going to be upset for a short period of time, but you think in the long term, your negative influence is going to be something that is detrimental to their greater good. And That's crazy to say, but that's certainly how I felt. And when I went to that property training, one of the things that they asked us to do, because we all know that growth doesn't come from comfort. We all had to get up at some point throughout the 5-day intensive and do an elevator pitch,
Yep.
just who we are, a little bit about our property business that was sort of yet to be formed. And I remember physically, I was shaking like a leaf. I was tremoring. And somehow I managed to speak with reasonable confidence for that 30 seconds, despite my knees literally knocking against each other. And that gave me a little bit of confidence. And it was quite funny because at the end of the 5-year intensive, we got our certificate and everyone got a glass of champagne. And my phone pinged. And it was my notification from the job centre to remind me about my appointment the next day. My husband and I were kind of like laughing at each other. It was like our secret joke. We're there and suited and booted. And there was a lot of really high performance people already in that room, new to property, but very experienced in life and business. And all of a sudden I'm getting this ping to say that I've got to go to the dole office to make sure I'm doing everything that I'm required to get my 70 quid a week. And
Yep.
Again, as you know, the importance of putting yourself out there with social media, which is something that one of my mentors told me on day one of the training. He said, look, regardless of your sector, the more people who know who you are, the more opportunities you create for people to do business with you. It's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. So I grasped the importance of that very early on and started putting myself out there on LinkedIn, which is where we've went on to raise millions of pounds of private investment. But the first time I did a video linking back to the depression and putting one foot in front of the other, I genuinely, Gary, spent a full day recording a 2-minute video for LinkedIn. And people will be like, that's a complete
I've
waste
been
of
there.
time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, a lot of people would just think this is nonsense, but for me it was about more than this video, which is a load of crap and is long since deleted. I don't even know what I was talking about, but it was the process I had to go through in terms of building my own confidence. And our mutual friend Rob Moore talks about start now, get perfect later. I think if you wait until you've got the confidence to be able to start, for a lot of us, we would never end up getting out the traps. And I talk a lot about vision, but your vision changes as you get evolved. And we talked about accountability and extreme ownership, which is something that I believe that differentiates the really successful people and perhaps people that are playing at a more mediocre level. It's that acknowledgement of where we are and where we want to be. And when I looked in that accountability mirror and I looked at myself and asked myself the question, would I do business with me? The answer was no. You can't bullshit yourself. The answer was no. Well, what are the attributes I would look for in somebody that I would do business with? I mentioned there we've went on to raise millions of pounds in private investment. Was I showing up? What was I professional? Was I, what was I demonstrating all of those qualities? And then I set about going to work on becoming that person and gaining those qualities and the attributes. And it wasn't so much what I needed to do in order to achieve my goals. The question that I asked myself was, who do I need to become to achieve those goals?
Honestly, it's like listening to myself. You can tell we've been on a personal development together, a journey together, Ellie, because it's like it's almost giving me shivers, like listening to this kind of stuff, because it's just like so bloody true. And I think, you've got a choice, haven't you? You're always constantly at a crossroads, and you've had a choice. And all right, you've got the internal resilience and everything else to do it, but that is so true in terms of who you need to become in order to be able to get to the results that you ultimately want to get to. And you've gone from a place of being at the depthest, darkest point of view in your mind, and I can't resonate with that in the slightest in relation to suicidal thoughts or postnatal depression, or even any kind of, yes, there's been negative days or anything else, but I would never say that I've been as low as depression or suicidal thoughts, for example. But listening to you and hearing how you've bounced back from that is so inspiring. And I think for many people listening to this, it's great that, you know, I bang on about this stuff, but hearing it from you where you've been, you know, lower than low is so powerful to so many people. And I'd like to finish it with just what your kind of one to three tips would be for someone who's currently sitting at that point where, you know, realistically the only way is up.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but it's a case of putting one foot in front of the other. And you know what's really interesting? You touched on earlier the importance of like morning routines and evening routines and things like that. And I'm a huge advocate for all of that stuff too. But if you'd have started to talk to me about this when I was at my lowest ebb, I wouldn't have thanked you for it, because there can be too much of a disconnect from where you are and where you want to be. And sometimes it's a case of chunking this down in manageable bite-sized pieces. So a tip I would say to people, if you are in this personal development space and you're following people like Gary and I, you know, take things not with a pinch of salt, but remember that the advice that we're given is based on where we are now, not necessarily based on we were back then. Because a successful day genuinely was getting out of bed and brushing my teeth at that point. I wasn't getting out of bed and doing ice baths like I'm doing every day now. You know, I wasn't doing Wim Hof breathing. And to be frank, if you'd have started speaking to me about the 5 a.m. club when, you know, I've got insomnia and I'm not getting to sleep to 2 a.m., I wouldn't have thanked you for it, Gary. And actually, it might have made me feel a bit worse, because it felt like I was feeling in yet another area of my life. So I think it's putting one step in front of the other and taking those steps, and just trying to be better than the person that you were yesterday, and listening to things and doing things that are going to make a positive impact. So I'm speaking to people that are right, you know, at the bottom here. So whether that's going for a walk, you know, you don't need to be signing up to do an ultra marathon. The small steps, the compound effect from the small incremental changes makes a huge difference. But putting one step in front of the other, absolutely. Getting around people that are more successful than you are in any area of your life, whether that's your fitness goals, whether that's your spiritual goals, you know, be around people that are going to empower you, that have done what you want to do. Like when I signed up for my half marathon, when I say signed up, I got thrown under the bus by a friend of mine who just done 2 double Ironman back to back, right? He got a world record. Guy's a nutter, absolute amazing guy, Stephen Green. And he was doing a Facebook Live, doing a debrief on his basically like where his mind had to go to in order to achieve that, not sleeping for like over 2 days. And, you know, he was physically broken and he'd been really in the doldrums with it. So I'm there, like I'm being a bit cocky in the group chat kind of thing, going, no, I'm just sat here with my glass of red wine. I've just had my Sunday dinner. Sounds really challenging, Steve. Anyway, he, in front of 1,000 people on this live, he says, right, Ellie McKay, you've got to do a half marathon by this date. Well, I couldn't run a bloody back, Gary. I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got 6 weeks to run a half marathon. So the first thing I did was get a coach, and I got Stephen's coach because he is used to training triathletes. Because with the greatest of respect, my circle at the time, my friends who I love dearly, if I told them I was going out to do a mile run, they'd be like, oh my God, you are amazing. How could anyone possibly run a mile? I needed to be around people that did marathons and ultra marathons for breakfast, because that's what I needed to see. That was the kind of chat that I needed to be hearing. I needed to be seeing and believing what was in order for me to go through, which might not be a lot for some of your listeners, but to go from not being able to run at all to doing a half marathon within 6 weeks was a big thing for me at that point. And I'm like that in all aspects of my life, you know, with business. Be careful who you take your advice from, because the reality is there's always far more reasons to fail than succeed. There's plenty of reasons for all of us to blame, complain, and justify. And, you know, you asked me to address the mums and things earlier with the postnatal depression. We've not got all this shit sorted out. You know, I've got 3 kids. It's Easter half term here. I put the wrong bloody dates in my diary, but the first time I've been organised enough to put the Easter holiday dates in my diary, and I put the wrong blooming dates in the diary. It was a logistical nightmare to sort. We've got very limited childcare. This is an ongoing evolution. I am not sat here as the finished article. But I found that by getting around positive people who inspire me, it helps on those darker days. Because even if you've not got depression, even if you've not got clinical depression, or you can't resonate with that, I think the majority of business owners and entrepreneurs can relate to the roller coaster. You know, that's why we see all these memes, because so many of us can empathize with them. You know, you're going through 50 million emotion just before breakfast sometimes. So yes, surround yourself with positive people who are further down the path that you want to travel. Continue to take one step in front of the other. And I'd say my third and final point would be the power of social media and putting yourself out there is something I'm hugely passionate about. But make sure that you're a producer and not a consumer, and don't get drawn in by other people's negativity or even positivity. Because if you're getting started out and you're doing your best, whether it's property or whatever else, and you're doing your first buy to let, but then somebody else who started at the same time of you's done 10 buy to lets, we all fall into that comparison trap. And rather than looking at what we've achieved and how far we've come, we look at what somebody else is doing, and actually that can negatively impact our mindset. And you're only ever seeing a very one-dimensional view in social media. So use it as a tool to inspire you. Unfollow anyone who's negative, and just content on just really concentrate on being the best version of you. And there is no get rich quick. This is a hard yards. There's going to be many highs and lows, and we're going to continue to experience those. But just know that if you keep taking the right actions and continue to work on yourself, because I really do believe that your business can only grow at the same extent that you do, then you'll be amazed at what you can achieve.
100%. And that's exactly why, you know that I've just rebranded this podcast episode 200, 170,000 downloads into the Pro podcast, because the mindset that you've got is a mindset of a pro, but it hasn't always been that way. You're in an environment now where you're surrounding yourself with other pros. And for many of you who are listening to this for the first time, who don't necessarily know my journey to a degree, but to show you why Ellie is a sister from another mister kind of thing, it's like 2015, exactly as you said. I was in my worst year ever. My team used to joke that if I left the CM postcode, I would come out in palpitations and everything else. I existed in this bubble with a almost 7-figure business with a team of 15, that I was the arrogant, cocky little twat who thought he knew everything. And, I didn't surround myself with other people. And when I discovered my niche in self-employed mortgages, I downsized. I started all over again. The first course I did after researching Tony Robbins in 2015 was NLP. And when I went to the first day, paid like 100 quid. I'm like, paying for 100 quid to go to London to learn this stuff and sit in a room. There was the light bulb moment, which you'll resonate with. Steve, who is a now really good friend of mine, and he's been on the podcast previously. He invited someone to the front of the room. And reluctantly, my nervous hand went into the air. Beads of sweat were going down my back. And I walked to the front of the room in front of 150, 200 people. And he did this exercise with me. But it was the light switch moment that anything was possible, and you've just got to keep stepping forward. So stepping forward from that event, it was, right, let's post on social media. By the June, let's do a video. By the November, let's do live videos. Right, who's a mentor that doing what I want to do, that I can pay to avoid all the messy middle bullshit and get to the outcome much, much quicker. And, probably like you, I've invested mid 6-figure or early 6 figures in my own business and mindset and marketing and personal development, but the ROI on that is 10, 20 times since 2016. And it is just that thing that when you look at it, you look at the iceberg, you see where we are now, exactly as you said, but there'll be one thing in your mind. For me, it was getting out of my comfort zone and realizing that it was my mindset that was the problem, and the pivotal moment of standing at the front of that room. But there'll be one thing that you can do right now, wherever you are, that can be the catalyst to a whole entire journey of where you could move to in the next, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And I'm sitting here today to give you context. I spoke about in 189, I think someone messaged me yesterday. My mum was given 24 hours to live, or 48 hours to live, back on the 2nd of January, and we're in April now. 2 days ago, I was told that she would have hours, if not days, to live. And I can feel myself getting emotional to it. But the thing is, even though that's going on, even though yesterday I was there all day, I was by her bed, everything else, even after this podcast is finished recording, I'm going straight to the house to then be there once again. It's the point that there's the habits and the routines of doing. Yesterday, I didn't feel like working out or lifting weights or doing my sprints that I would normally do. So I went for an 1.5 hour walk. I put my hood on. I breathed. I concentrated on being out in the open space. This morning, I went to the gym. And when I felt myself getting emotional, I picked up a heavier fucking weight, you know, because your mind is like a muscle that you can choose to work out. And the more you do it, the more resilient you become, the stronger your brain gets. And there's always someone worse off. But it's, you know, the Henry Ford saying that you said, the other one that is coming to my brain and I'm delaying because I can't bloody remember it is doing what you want to do, even when you don't want to do it. You know, that's something that Rob Moore said to me in terms of, you know, the social media. I don't want to go fucking live on social media. I don't want to do videos. I don't want to put myself out there. But it goes back to many things that I've spoken about on this podcast in terms of personal brand, opportunity, supporting clients, supporting family, making great connections. And we've got one life. You've got one opportunity to realistically live it and make the most of it and have the biggest impact that you can.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Another favorite of mine is Jim Rohn. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Because it's not going to get easier, guys. So it sounds really negative. No, it's I think
There's always a challenge.
The bigger you get, the bigger your challenges get. But you know what's really interesting as well? Like, yeah, I
New
think
level, new devil.
I overshare the challenges, and I do that because I think it keeps it real on social media and it shows people that it's not all sunshine and unicorns. But let me just finish with a positive note. You know, 4 years in, have I made sacrifices with my family? Absolutely. A big part of what I do is getting out there, it's networking, it's meeting people in person, it's speaking at events, it's raising finance, it's dinners with clients. And yes, there's been times where I'll be staying away for 3, 4, 5 nights at a time. Absolutely. But as you do start to create the life that you want, and this is why it's so important to have that vision, which as I said earlier, will continually evolve.
Yep.
You know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, your business challenges get bigger. You know, I say that in jest. Of course, there's always going to be obstacles thrown at you. But now we're in a position that this is the first day I've worked in the two weeks school holidays.
Nice.
That's my choice. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've still recorded podcasts. I'll still jump on Zooms with people in an evening. It's how you define work. But I now have that freedom and the luxury to be able to go and book a villa for a month on the 6 weeks holidays and buy that time back, because success to me isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about all those other things. It's the mental resilience, the fitness, the health. I don't want to be the richest man in the graveyard. The relationships are the highest form of currency, and the people that are the most important in my life is friends and family. And I tell you what, with the hard work and determination, we are still now at the point we are creating that life that I could have only dreamed of, to be looking at beautiful properties in Dubai and being able to afford to put all 3 children in private education and give them a standard of living that, was more than I had. That's, as parents, what we want, to give our children the opportunities that we didn't have, not to spoil them. That comes with another host of problems, doesn't it? You don't want, like the amount of times I say to my children, do you know that KFC is a treat? We used to only get a Burger King on our birthdays, and like I think the majority of parents can resonate with that one. But yes, you do start to create the life that you want, and it is all worth it, even on those darkest days. And that all comes from doing the things that you don't want to do. And I don't want to get in the bloody ice bath every morning at 6 o'clock. I want to stay in my bed, but I feel amazing for it. So stick with it.
Stick with it. So finishing off then, Ellie, I think we can't finish this off with, without talking about that first year in property. And as I say, I've got many advisors and business owners who listen to this. My brokerage specializes in looking after self-employed business owners who want to buy and invest in property. And I'm a huge advocate for using company profits to be able to, rich dad, poor dad, and Think and Grow Rich, build assets that then support your life and then give you the multiple streams of income and everything else. So for those people for the advisors who are looking there with their business that's currently giving them a lifestyle and they've got some money sitting in the bank, or the other business owners or self-employed individuals who, I had a stat the other day that there's 5.5 million businesses in the UK and 4.5 million of them don't even employ one person.
Wow.
So there's like 1 million businesses that basically have employees. And there was another stat that I heard as well, that 90% of businesses don't get past the VAT threshold as well. It's like, it's carnage, the amount of people that actually do move up. But going back to your initial start in that property, and obviously you've developed from, as you mentioned, buy to let into HMO to now doing hotels and everything else. For the business owners and self-employed people that are listening to this, that want to start on that property journey, and to give you all context, I can't hang a freaking curtain pole. I hate, if I'm honest, I don't even really like property, and I've been a mortgage advisor for 19 years.
I don't.
It's like, it's the vehicle, and it's the start and the beginning and the outcome that it gets for my clients is what I really love in terms of the mortgage industry. But, for the people who are listening to this, who want to use company profits to invest in property, bring in all of your 4 years of experience, a multi-million-pound property portfolio, what is your best advice for those who want to start out? Or let's do two parts. Part one, for those that want to start out, and for part two, those that are on the journey and want to scale.
So what I would say is, more hassle than it's worth. We offer fixed return investments. So give me your company profits. We've got a SaaS. If you've got a pension, if you're looking to maximize your profits or company profits, get in touch and we will sort you out with better returns in the bank. But for anyone looking to do it themselves, then I would say, can you do it without putting yourself out there? Absolutely, but it'll take you a lot longer. And even if you're starting off with capital, you'll soon come unstuck. It doesn't take many properties for that money to get clogged up in the wheel. So for me, learning the art of raising finance, and it is an art, is so important, because we went and raised £4 million in our first year. We didn't have any of our own money, and it's allowed us to be able to build that multi-million pounds property portfolio. So if you can put yourself out there, it's back to what I was saying earlier, the more people who know who you are, the more opportunities you create to do business with you, then you've got the autonomy to go out there and do what other people possibly can't. And the other element of it, and it's also marketing related, it's trying to get access to those properties that other people don't, whether that's through your own marketing campaigns or whether that's through relationship building, because actually we've done it all. We've had adverts on back of buses, radio adverts, we've done digital marketing, we've done Facebook ads, we've done leaflet drops, we've done magazines, lots of things with varying degrees of success. But where we've actually got the majority of our properties from is through relationships that we've actually built up with auction houses, with estate agents, so that when they do have sales falling through and they're in a critical situation and need somebody to act quickly before putting it back on the open market, we're the go-to person. So yeah, put yourself out there. Relationships are the highest form of currency, online and offline. Get good at raising finance, and just build a good team, and your journey will evolve as ours have. Because when we were doing buy to lets for our own property portfolio, our criteria was 250 quid. We were happy with that net positive cash flow after letting agents and what have you. But the reality is, and we're all starting at different points, but that's not net when you've got your accountancy fees and everything else and your office premises and staff, etc., etc. It only takes one boiler to go in that year and your profits are completely wiped out. So then you evolve your thinking, and we were introduced to HMOs, and then we became specialists in HMOs. And then our criteria was £1,000 a month net positive cash flow. And then you see the amount of, it's just like I've been really negative here about property, but this is just our experience. Then you see the amount of hassle that HMOs can be, and how quickly properties can go into disrepair and what have you. And we just thought, well, why would we do that when you can get into high-end service accommodation and make £10,000 a month from a property, or doing like our land and development that we're doing at the moment, the 8 properties in the coach house, like that's 2 million profit just from those 2 little projects. Now that's a long game. Anyone who knows land will know that's not an overnight process. You can be looking at 18, 24 months for that to come into fruition, sometimes even longer if it's bigger developments, but it's higher risk and higher reward. So all of a sudden your criteria changes, because the amount of effort and hassle that you have to put into these projects, you're looking for a higher return. Because We've been let down time and time again by builders. We've had to sack builders mid-projects. We've had to get rid of 5 project managers. This game is not easy. You're sitting on properties for 2 years to get planning permission because of COVID, by which point building materials have went up 60%. So there is no such thing as passive income. But if you're trying to manage your own property with your own buy-to-lets, but if you're looking for truly, truly passive income, invest with somebody like ourselves, not necessarily us, but why wouldn't it be us, and get a fixed return and do it that way. But if you're looking to get involved in property, get yourself educated, find someone that you resonate with that's further down the path that you want to travel. The education in property gets a lot of stick, and there is a lot of shysters out there, but there's also a lot of good guys as well. So learn about property, learn about the strategies, and also learn how to market yourself and your business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you mentioned there as well, the thing around the relationships and being the go-to person in the estate agents. And I never really realized this. Like I thought when I first got involved in the property investment circles and we started looking after, property investors, that, you just stick yourself on Rightmove and have a little look and you find the property. But it doesn't work like that at all. The ones who are ultra successful do treat it like an absolute business and are in the estate agents, are building the relationships, are being that go-to, when a deal falls through or something comes available before it goes on Rightmove. That's the ones who are being successful in property. And my question for you is, who sources your properties and who finds the deals and who gets involved in all the property side? Is that Mark? Is that his kind of role in it, and you do the relationship side?
Yeah, I mean, we're not really actively sourcing properties anymore. We have enough contacts
For yourselves,
now
though, I mean.
Yeah, so he's definitely a lot more operational. I tend to
Yeah.
do it's great because I'm the face of the business. I get all the recognition. And Mark, I'm going to be honest, he works 10 times as hard. He's the one that's on his laptop every night at midnight when I'm absolutely sound asleep. But the majority of our things come from relationship at very senior level with estate agents, the owners of the estate agents. We also work with very trusted property sourcers that bring us our deals. We're working with Sarah McDermott and her team at the moment to source our high-end luxury holiday homes. So it's all about life leverage for us. It's all about getting those results and valuing our own time and realizing where our expertise lies. And if somebody can do it better for us within a quicker and more efficient time frame, and we could be spending that time making more money, then we do that. One of my mentors said something to me that was actually, it's very simple, and I like things to be kept simple in order to truly grasp them. He's like, you've got your £10 an hour task, your £100 an hour task, and your £1,000+ an hour tasks. And, as a CEO or as a business leader, you should not be doing anything that's less than £1,000 an hour task. So if you can outsource that to somebody who can do that for less, then do it. And yes, that comes with its own set of complications and things like that. But you absolutely have to do that in order to grow, because too many people, you mentioned the statistic there, which was fascinating, about the amount of business owners that don't employ any staff because they can't get out of that mentality that no one can do it better than they can do it themselves. But the true art to business is leveraging other people and conducting the orchestra. You don't need to play all the different instruments. You just need to know how to keep the moving parts going and conduct the orchestra.
100%. One of my first coaches said to me, a managing director manages the workflow. They don't do the work.
Yes.
And it's so true. A podcast episode that I've done is called Delegate and Elevate. And that's, the way I have 33 people across 3 businesses and an 18-person brokerage that runs itself is just through delegating. And as you say, what are the £1,000 costs? Only I can do the podcast. But once it's done, someone else will download this and rip it and put it to the video team and put it to the podcast team. And miraculously, it will end up and I'll just find it there on a Thursday and share it. And the team will send you the assets and we'll both promote it and job done. It's like only we can be sat here now. And that's the thing that has the biggest impact on our personal brands and our businesses, and everything else takes care of itself thereafter.
Can I just say, our point of that as well is, and this is where I see a lot of people actually going wrong, this is £1,000 an hour task all day long. And the majority of people don't grasp that. They're too busy working to fanny around with social media or podcasts or anything else. But the reality was, had I not put myself out there with social media and podcasting, we wouldn't have had any of the finance to be able to go and do any of those deals. And I mentioned relationships are the highest form of currency. My On a Mission podcast has got nothing to do with property at all. I've had the odd property person on there, but we talk about all sorts of different things. People of inspiration from all walks of life, from military people to authors and everything in between. But the amount of clients that I'm now onboarding from that, because they like, know, and trust me. You're building relationships at a different point. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I'm not going to the local BNI meeting. I'm not going to the local 4N meeting where you're in a saturated market trying to shout the loudest. Instead, I'm going directly to people like Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok, who, is a phenomenal guy. What he's achieved, a little guy from Bolton to be selling a, multi-billion pound organization. It's incredible. And we've then went on to, he was in the south of France when we recorded the podcast. We've then met, his wife Julie and himself a couple of times in Manchester for lunch. They've been to our house in Doncaster. To me, that's worth a lot more than money in the bank. And the learnings that I have from sitting chatting one-on-one to a billionaire about his learnings and his challenges and decades of business and what it truly takes to get to that level. Not somebody, no offense, but lecturing from the front of a university stadium, auditorium or what have you, but someone that's actually walked the walk. That is absolutely invaluable. So these are £1,000 an hour tasks all day long. You don't know what business ventures might come off the back of it. You don't know what relationships that you might create. It's very hard to quantify the ROI from marketing, but it's something that you do beautifully.
Yeah, and you do, certainly. And I think just for anyone who sits here sort of, with a little bit of I think, it's all right for you, or, Ellie and I have had our fair share of adversity, but I'm in the process of looking at medically if I have actually got ADHD, because I always feel like there's a part of my brain that I can't fix or that I can't get to the bottom of within my personal development and everything else. And I'm someone who loves a process and a system and understanding everything. And the reason why I say that is because, going back to what you said, whenever I work with a coaching client or a business owner in my coachings or programs, the first thing we look at is what's your vision. So for Ellie and I, we love progress. We don't want to sit still. Progress is an element of growth. And when you get into the personal development space, it's like, yes, new level, new devil. But you often hear in someone's journey, they get to a point and it's like the Olympian who goes and wins the gold, but there's nothing else outside of their life other than that gold medal. Like, my gold medal is realistically death in many respects. It's the end of my life. So the journey that I'm embarking upon is just to keep stepping forward, but not just stepping forward, just stepping up the ladder. So every year I would like to move, 1%, or if I can move 1% a month, happy days. But I want to keep growing. And Ellie's nodding for people who can't see on the podcast. And wherever you are in your vision, just be clear. You don't need to do the podcast if you don't want to do the podcast, because your vision isn't the same as mine and Ellie's. But at least be clear on what that vision is and where you realistically want to get to. And I guarantee you, even if you do a podcast in your local area and you speak to local businesses or whatever it might well be, and it doesn't get millions of downloads or hundreds of downloads or whatever, you'll meet great people, you'll have great conversations. And as this whole thing, Pro is about perseverance leads to results, which creates opportunity. You'll build your own opportunities in life to get more results.
Whatever you, that's what your pro stood for. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I like a little bit of values, vision, mission, values, all that kind of thing. But yeah, perseverance leads to results, which creates opportunity. So my final little question for you, Ellie, because I'm conscious of your time as well now, just because I'm very intrigued. If I worked with my wife for probably more than about 2 hours, we would be divorced. So how do you manage the work-life balance of 3 kids and your relationship with Mark?
It's an ever-evolving journey, genuinely, Gary, because whenever you put focus on one area of your life, then we can be guilty of detracting from another area. And keeping all those balls in the air is challenging. You find, I'm being a great mom, I'm absolutely smashing it, I'm on top of all my business commitments, and then I'll be mindful of not having date night with Mark for quite a while. So it's constant test and measure. And I think, I don't know if anyone fully has this sussed out, because there's times in your life, there's seasons that you do need to go all in on certain areas. I don't subscribe to the hustle mentality. It's not why I got into business. I like to do things a lot more passively. And for me, you mentioned it earlier, when I create more space for myself, time for myself, that's when I come up with my best ideas. And how I do work's not how the majority of people do work. I don't really go on my laptop at all. I can pretty much do anything from my phone. My work revolves around meeting people and talking to people, and it's hard to quantify what I do. But with regards to Mark, he's definitely a lot more operational. When we first started working together 4 years ago, I wasn't sure if we were going to make it, not just in business, but I wasn't even sure if our marriage was going to survive, because we've never really been a shouty couple. We've always bickered, as people do, but we've never really raised our voices at one another. And I remember there was one day in our old office where I was literally shouting at him, and I just thought, what is like got into me here? This is not bringing out the best part of my personality. And we've always said for years prior to working with each other that we've got such different skill sets. Mark's very technical. He's very methodical. He loves his. I wouldn't say he's an introvert, but he certainly isn't an extrovert like me. He is very much prefers to be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And we knew that if we were able to collaborate on something with those opposing skill sets, it could be dynamite. But the reality was very different. And it took us a long time to suss that out and have boundaries of when we could and when we couldn't talk about work, which is difficult when you're so passionate about what you do, because we were just talking about it constantly. And the other thing when you're starting a business from scratch is you don't have these systems or processes in place. You don't have roles and responsibilities. You're a jack of all trades until you're trying to figure out where you slot into things. So that startup phase was very challenging. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, putting one step in front of the other. And actually, we're like ships in the night a lot of the time now. We come together for meetings. We have a meeting every single morning. We have a meeting every single evening to make sure that we're in the loop, because that communication is really important. But we have very, very defined roles and responsibilities now that play to both of our skill sets. And I can say genuinely that it's the best thing that's ever happened to us, because we're on that shared journey. We've got the shared goals. We have the vision, and not many people can really understand what it's like to go through this. Am I saying everyone needs to be in business with their partners? Absolutely not. But for us, with what we're trying to achieve within our different businesses, we spearhead different sides of the operations, which is why it works beautifully. But it's really amazing to have someone that fully gets me and gets what we are both trying to achieve.
Yeah, I love that, Ellie. I absolutely love that. And although I jest that me and my wife would be divorced if we worked together for more than 2 hours, exactly what you said there, shared vision for our lives, shared values for how we raise the kids. We're the yin to the yang. I'm the face and she's the behind the scenes. It's I'm 100 miles an hour and she brings me down as much as I speed her up. And it's like that complementary thing. And for me, I always talk to my coaching clients about this. Obviously, you work with your partner, so it makes it really good for you to have a shared vision within your business. But for me, the key is sitting down with my wife once a week and saying, right, what's your diary look like for hairdressing next week? This is what I've got on over the course of the next month. Get it in your diary so we don't do. But this is why, exactly as you said, my mentality is short-term pain for long-term gain. Yes. If I'm going to go through the hustle and grind phase, then it's sitting down and saying to Aisha, right, I'm recruiting, I'm putting a new system in, I've got to double down on marketing, I'm going to be 3 weeks, I might not be home for dinner, I might say I am going to be, and then the shit will hit the fan, I need a bit of flexibility, just allow it to happen. And as long as you communicate, it's fine. But then when I get to the end of that 3 weeks through the short-term pain, the person's recruited, they're trained, they're onboarded, the new marketing's kicked in, blah, 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 whatever system broke is now fixed. Then it goes back to normality and I'm finishing work at 4 o'clock and I'm having a day off, and the weekends I'm not sitting on the sofa with my laptop, whatever it might well be. But for those who don't work with partners, just communication is key, whether you're in it or whether you're out of it.
Yeah, I love that. It's pretty much exactly been my experience. And I think once you've got that and you have that shared vision for your life, that's the most important thing, whether you're business partners or not.
Yeah. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on the Pro podcast. For those of you who haven't then go and have a listen to Ellie's On a Mission podcast. She has got some fantastic guests on there. We will put links in the show notes to all of Ellie's social medias and podcasts, and where you can find out more information to go and connect with her and learn more from the amazing, the wonderful, the awesome Ellie McKay.
Oh, loved it. Thanks, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
But I always end one podcast. You thought we were going to end there, but we're not.
Oh.
My final point, as I mentioned, pro, perseverance leads to results, creates opportunity. What does pro mean to you?
Being a pro, you said it earlier, it's turning up and performing to the best of your ability, even on the days that you don't want to do it. Being the best version of yourself under any circumstances. And you are the master of that, Gary.
You can't take that. You are the master of that, Ellie, on our podcast today. Thank you so much indeed for giving up your time. Ladies and gents, over and out. See you on the next one.